The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
All right, we should be talking about the national championship game in football on January the 2nd, not January the 21st. But it is what it is. And we had a worthy national champion emerge last night as Ohio State went up 31-7 and held on to beat Notre Dame 31-23. It was an exciting finish, which frankly I wasn't up for because I tuned out at halftime. I felt like Ohio State had pretty much taken control of this game, which they did. And it's a great story. Less than 2 months ago, the Ohio State faithful were ready to fire Ryan Day, the head coach, after losing to Michigan, and they still might want to fire him. That's how crazy it is. But he's got the national championship, and he's got the right to say, I told you so. And his players have the right to say, I told you so. It was a bad scene after they lost to Michigan, no question about it. Bad on the part of Michigan, I felt. There was a lot of people yelling about Ohio State players getting upset that Michigan was attempting to plant the flag on their field at the 50-yard line, and a big fight broke out and all that. I mean, it was just as ugly as you can get. And Ryan Day looked like he had seen a ghost, and later said after losing his father, this was about as bad as you could get. Losing that game to Michigan, because this was supposed to be the year. You know, Jim Harbaugh is now in the NFL. A lot of the players are gone. They had a year that was a little bit above 500, and it was at Ohio State. This was finally going to be the year with the $20 million spent on players that Ohio State would beat Michigan, but they didn't do it. They didn't do it. Nobody's really too worried about that loss they had early in the season against Oregon, and they avenged that by beating Oregon in the playoff. But the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry is such that that stench lingers, and it lingers for a long time. And even though they'll be bringing home the trophy from Atlanta last night, there are still going to be people in Columbus who say, yeah, but you lost to Michigan. In some ways, that's good. You know, in some ways, that's a rivalry thing. And that endures despite, conferences that have like 60 teams now. The fact that Stanford is now an ACC rival, that the Big Ten has teams in Oregon and Seattle and places like that. I mean, it's just insane. So, I think the fact that there is that war that still exists between the two old-time Big Ten rivals, because the Big Ten ain't what the Big Ten used to be, but that still endures is part of the picture. And before I roll into what happened last night, let me start with what I noticed in the pregame and the backlash that I got from this. And, look, I have kids. They didn't grow up with pets. My wife didn't like dogs, so I didn't make any real effort to have a dog in the house. But when they grew up and had partners, now they're both married, they got dogs. And my daughter has a Portuguese water dog, and my son and his now wife have I don't even know what it is, a very small dog, which they needed a small dog because they lived in a very small apartment when Chewy joined them as a group some years ago, and now they live in a bigger apartment in Seattle. But they treat that dog as like a member of the family, as they should. My son-in-law and daughter now have two children, two beautiful grandchildren, and a dog that they treat very, very well. And the dog is part of the family. When they take family pictures, the dog is in it. And my son and his wife, when they go on trips, they like to take the dog with them. So I get that. I understand that. But in the pregame, I see Reese Davis standing next to Kirk Herbstreit, and Kirk Herbstreit is holding a leash, and at the end of the leash is his dog. And I love dogs. Dogs are great, and it's great that people love their dogs. But I put out this tweet. It's great that Kirk Herbstreit loves his dog. But what is the purpose of standing on the field with the dog on a leash while he does his pregame spiel? It's a look-at-me move. Make it about the game. I don't like coaches who bring their kids up for the post-game interviews. They got nothing to do with the business of holding a session with reporters so they can get their job done. And I know the Herbie thing is all warm and fuzzy, and he had another dog that he used to travel with, and that dog died, and he got this new dog, and that's great. But that's not part of analyzing the game. To me, it minimizes whatever he has to say about this matchup because he's got a dog on a leash in the middle of the field. What is the purpose of this? So the backlash on this, some agreed with me, but I got a lot of what I usually get, old man, get off my lawn, all that stuff. I know that comes with the territory. But I got stuff like, why do you hate dogs? What else did I get? Have you been following college football all year? There's a story behind it. Yeah, I know the story about it. Get over it, you effing loser. Another one said, I never get tired of dogs. Doesn't bother me at all. Okay, that's fine. Another guy said, people who have an opinion about this one way or another are very weird. Okay, maybe I'm very weird. Another is, let's see. Some said my tweet was a look at me move. Well, that's, Twitter is always about me. But I'm doing my job here. If I had a dog, the dog wouldn't be here in the studio with me. The dog does not help my job in any way. There's no reason for me to have a dog here. I wonder how many people go to work with their dog. Kirk Herbstreit did last night for whatever reason. And, I got this. You sound like a miserable person. It's a dog. Who cares? Let's see. People love dogs. I do. My wife enjoys watching it. Okay. Well, I'm glad your wife does. Hating on a dog was not on my bingo card for today. Hope you feel better after this post. People like his dog. Same can't be said for your old washed-up ass. Okay. All right. That's fine. But I'm really surprised at the reaction that it got both ways. I thought it was like, well, what is the dog doing on the field? Or it could be, just get over it. It's fine. He brings his dog to work. People seem to like it. Okay, fine. But he's not what Lee Corso is. Lee Corso is now sort of the mascot of the show. His main function is to put on the hat or the mascot head of whatever team he's picking to win. I give him a lot of credit for hanging in there. He had a stroke, and these words don't come as easily for him anymore. And he was really the Dick Vitale of college football, really for a long, long time. So I give him that. But Herbstreit is supposed to be the guy that gives you coaching analysis. He's to college football what Jay Billis is to basketball. And this whole shtick with the dog, it's fine. But again, I don't see the purpose of him having the dog on a leash while he's doing his pregame work on the field. I know there's backlash for that. And I know I heard it. I saw it on Twitter last night. I just, I just don't see it. And is this going to lead to more people bringing their pets to work with them? Maybe it will. Trump has ordered all the federal workers back to the office. They've been used to working at home, taking care of their dogs. Did the dogs go with them? Is that going to be acceptable? Well, Herbstreit did it. It's okay. We'll see. Anyway, after the game, Herbstreit, who did play quarterback at Ohio State, grew up in Columbus. His father played there. He joined Scott Van Pelt along with his partner Chris Fowler after the Ohio State win last night, and you'll hear. And at one point, Herbstreit picks up a tissue to blot his eyes. You'll hear Herbstreit get very emotional about what Ohio State has overcome this year after the Michigan loss to get all the way and win the national championship. Here they are with SVP.
Herbie, I'll let you start as a guy grew up there and wore the uniform. What's the story of this team?
Oh, don't start with me, man. I'm a little emotional. I'm just fired up for these guys. When I call these games, I'm incredibly objective, and I love all these Ohio State teams, but this team, because of what they went through to get to this point, you're just happy,
Yeah,
just
man.
happy for them.
We're all from somewhere, all right? Zero apologies for any of the emotion. I think it's all understandable. I'll ask Chris a question once you get yourself together.
It's seventh national title, seventh for Ohio State, but none of them have been won like this, Scott, as you said, right? So they win the first year of the 14 bracket, and they had to beat Alabama in New Orleans to do it, to beat Oregon. Now you come into this year, and off that low, to win a championship this way, to survive 4 rounds against 4 really high-quality teams. Yeah, they're expected to win, but you got to go out and handle business. And they played from the front most of the time. But to execute collectively and to still be standing, that's really the story. I mean, I don't know if they were written off. I mean, they were ripped apart by a lot of their own people in Columbus.
They went to hell and back. I mean, we can try to make this sound soft, but my thing is I talk to these players, I talk to these coaches. I know what they faced after that Michigan game. I know the pain, and I know that a lot of people thought, the hell with this guy. Who else can be the guy? And I know what that did. That's a real life thing, and to have to put that away and not be, like, who are you to question? Like, he just handled it, took the high road, didn't say anything, went out, got his team ready to play 4 games, and they won it. And I think that's why I'm emotional, is what these guys faced. And if you notice, they just kept talking about each other. They didn't talk about, anything else. It was each other. It was the coaches. It was because it was those guys in that locker room that believed that they could make this run. And I think that's what, 20 years from now, that's what I'll remember, is how they kept it together just by themselves and had to fight out of that dark hole that they were in. And it's pretty special to think. It's a great example for all of us to learn about adversity. And we want to quit. We want to give up. It's a great example, not just for football, but in life, about getting through the tough times. And the good times are coming ahead. And that's what this is.
I totally agree, and you feel so fortunate in this job that we have to do what we do anytime, but to be here on the sideline watching as that conversion happens and Smith catches the ball, throw the ball to 4, by the way, right? And you see JTT and Sawyer and the hugs and the real love, right? And I'm glad Reese asked about it, because they lean into faith. And the faith not just in God, but in one another. And I think you saw that reflected in this particular journey as they sing. I don't know if I'm supposed to lay out here, Herbie, or not, but maybe I will for just a moment.
Yeah. I know in Columbus they love this.
Might not have thought that they would be singing that song in this city tonight when they lost to Michigan, but here they are. Chris, if I could rewind the tape back to that emphatic opening drive, I think a lot of folks wondered, could Notre Dame stand toe-to-toe with this team? They showed us plenty to get here, but they suffered a number of injuries along the way, and were they built to stand up to Ohio State? And that first drive said, hey, we're here to fight. But the answer from Ohio State with 3 consecutive touchdown drives in the first half was just remarkable. As you're calling it, what were you thinking throughout the first half?
Well, I've never seen an opening drive like that in any game. I forget a championship game. 9:45 off the clock against a tough defense. Riley Leonard literally emptying the bucket at his guts, just landing on the ball. He looked like he could barely stand up at the end of the drive. You thought, okay, that's a good opening statement. Right. But then Ohio State had every answer, and Notre Dame simply could not get off the field, could not get a third down stop. And that was, in their end, the demise as the lead built that was a little bit too big to make up for. Now, they battled back. I gave them no chance down 24 of even being in the game at the end. And they found a way to do that, and it took the call that, as Howard said post-game, took large Buckeyes for Chip Kelly to make that heave downfield. And Smith justified the faith, and so did Howard. But, Notre Dame, Scott, to just focus them for a second, it is Ohio State's night. It's a massive year for Notre Dame. They had never won a playoff game until this 3-game run. They had lost 9 consecutive New Year's Six bowls, not counting the embarrassment in this championship game against Alabama. They erased all that. They silenced some doubters. They went to SEC country, and they beat up the bullies from Georgia. I know for Notre Dame people that meant a lot. They came up short tonight. Marcus Freeman will be disappointed that his team, in his words, didn't play their best early enough to hang with them and really give themselves a great chance to win. But there's no shame for me in the Irish for what they did this season. Oh. Lost 1 game 4.5 months ago by 2 points. It was an embarrassing loss. They responded brilliantly. They had plenty of adversity, a ton of injuries. So resolve and resilience on both sides tonight. Ohio State the better team and the deserving winner, but I do want to salute Notre Dame.
No, they were, Scotty, as you know, they're down 31-7 against this juggernaut. and not looking like they're going to slow down anytime soon. And they're going to be able to get a stop. Oh wow, they got a stop, which is like, okay, that's a starting point. Now you got to go score, and they did. And then they got the 2-pointer, and they just wouldn't go away. So that's culture. That's Marcus Freeman in just his third year, what he's creating. I think he's scratching the surface of where this thing's going to go. So tough night. There'll be a lot of things. We could have done this or could have done that. But as far as what they're building in South Bend, well, I'm excited to see where this thing goes with him as the head coach.
Well, that's Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler with Scott Van Pelt after the Ohio State win over Notre Dame last night. Let me say this about the college football playoff. I guess the people that run it are going to pat themselves on the back and say it was a great success and all the money that came in, the television ratings, the whole thing. The problem with it was very, very long and drawn out, multiple weekends. Only a couple of the games were really compelling. The Texas overtime win over Arizona State was one of them. The closest thing to a Cinderella is Notre Dame, and you can never think of Notre Dame as a Cinderella. Yeah, they got here and weren't supposed to, maybe, but I like it better when you get this wrapped up on January 1st. They're getting gobbled up by the NFL. I think there were a lot of people who didn't even realize that there was a college football championship game last night. I'm talking about casual fans, because the NFL ate up the entire weekend. And Monday, everybody's talking about the Final Four teams, including the Cinderella Commanders. And, can the Eagles survive against a team that's chewing people up along the way? That's what people are talking about. Kansas City winning by the hair of their chinny chin chin. Can they keep it going to a Super Bowl? That's what people were talking about yesterday in sports, not this game. So I'd like to see this backed up and have the national championship game played on New Year's night. That's when it should be. And I think they could do this by backing the whole thing up. You can play the Army-Navy game alone. Why not play it Friday of Thanksgiving weekend? They've done that in the past. Now it stands alone, okay, and it's the middle of December, and then they start the playoff. But, it's just too late. It's too late. This is NFL time. And college basketball, that's gotten compressed too, because the NFL eats up most of the regular season. But once they get to the tournament, they pretty much own it. All you have really is the start of baseball season. And, generally the championship game coincides with opening night in baseball or opening day, about that time. They own that period of time. College football is competing with the NFL, and they're losing on this. Maybe they're making enough money to make it worth their while, and maybe it makes sense for them, but this is too late to do it. It's way too late. And, after you play a 12-game season, then you got to win 4 to win the national championship. I know it's pro football, but the length of the season is getting more and more ridiculous. And I just look at it like, you really need to have some separation of season. You have to have that. And because the NFL owns basically 11 months of the calendar, the only month that they don't own is July, and they start training camp in late July. So that's my 2 cents on this. The game was okay. It's a worthy champion, team that spent a lot of money. Both teams had quarterbacks who are one-year players. This is the new college football. It is what it is. But I think in terms of the attention that they used to get when the championships were, okay, maybe decided on paper because we had a vote and we didn't have a playoff. But January 1st should be the day that college football owns, and then they get out of the way until the next year. That's not what happened this year. All right, coming up, more flowers thrown at number 5 as Steve Young said some interesting things about the composure that he's noticed with Jaden Daniels. And Mark Schlereth, former Redskin, was a starter last time they won the Super Bowl. Can't say enough good things about Jaden Daniels. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony and Mike reveling in the success of the Commanders. We'll play what they said last night about it on PTI coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. We played this yesterday. I don't know if you heard it. It goes back almost a year ago. It was February of 2024 as the draft preparation was in full swing. It's amazing how I feel this year and how this January is different from so many others. You know, I said to a friend of mine this morning, Manishtana Halayla Hazeh, which is what we say at Passover every year. Why is this night different from all other nights? Why is this January different from all other Januaries? Well, this January, the football team is still playing this late in the month. There is no concern about who's going to be the next coach, because everybody knows that Dan Quinn is coming back no matter what happens on Sunday. We know that Jaden Daniels is the quarterback, and wherever they draft, who gives a fig right now? Nobody cares, because they're going to be at the bottom of the draft. They're among the final 4 teams, so what are they picking? No lower than 28, or no higher than 28, I guess I should say. So, you know, what's the big deal here? And every other January, what are they doing at the top of the draft? They're going to take a quarterback. Are they going to trade up? Are they going to trade down? What are they going to do? Who's going to be the no? None of that. But last year was, okay, who's going to be the quarterback? Who's going to be the coach? I guess at this point, Adam Peters had already been hired as the general manager, and he'd hired Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's team got eliminated in the first weekend of the season with the Dallas Cowboys, and he interviewed for the job, and he got it. What's interesting, though, is that Ben Johnson, depending on what you hear and what you want to believe, was the first choice for the job. And, the reports were that the ownership group was on the Josh Harris plane flying to Detroit to interview him when they learned on social media that Ben Johnson had pulled out of the race for head coaches, and he was going to stay another year at Detroit, kind of left them at the altar. Well, now, Ben Johnson is going to become the coach of the Chicago Bears, and he's going to coach Caleb Williams, who still could be a great quarterback. I mean, he could be a Hall of Fame quarterback. But in year 1, he was lapped by Jaden Daniels. And having passed on the opportunity, I don't know if the job would have ultimately been offered, but he took himself out of the running before it ever got to that point. Passing on a possible opportunity to coach a generational quarterback, he's going to try to revive a quarterback who didn't have a bad year. I mean, he wasn't terrible. The team was bad, but it's pretty clear he ain't Jaden Daniels yet. Whether he will be or not, we'll have to see. But there were some who looked at what was being put on tape and what was being done at the pro days. We had Louis Riddick saying that he had gone to all the pro days, and if he were the Chicago Bears, he would have taken Jaden Daniels. And Dan Orlovsky, who puts in a lot of time watching tape, he watches every game, he says, and I believe him. Orlovsky said this about the big quarterback debate heading into the 2024 draft.
If I were the Chicago Bears right now, I would take Jaden Daniels out of LSU. That is not a knock on Caleb Williams. That is a plus in Jaden Daniels. I think, number one, when you watch all these guys play, the best thrower, the best guy against man coverage, ball placement-wise, is Jaden Daniels. Number two, when we're talking about explosive play, like guys who have to throw the ball downfield, what does it look like? Jaden Daniels throws the ball best downfield. And then number three, who's got the best pocket piece? When I say piece, it's P-E-A-C-E. All these guys are athletic. It's no longer like this plus. Every one of these guys has that attribute. The patience and the peace within the pocket, he's the best at. Candidly, I think when it comes to what guy had the best game, none of these guys' games compared to Jaden Daniels against Florida. If you just watch that player versus the University of Florida, you would go, that's the best player in college football, and he's going to be the guy that transfers the best into the NFL. Caleb Williams is fantastic. I think Jaden Daniels is better.
That's Dan Orlovsky, a little less than a year ago. And I love that term, pocket piece, P-E-A-C-E. Can you learn it, or is it something you're born with? Steve Young talking about it yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show.
It's like a gift from heaven, right? Like you have a way of dealing with, if adrenaline comes into your body, and most human beings, it shrinks your brain, you get tight, you sweat, and sometimes things get tight and people respond opposite. Like your heartbeat goes slower, you kind of calm down, and those are the guys that, those are the greats. And composure is something that you have that kind of gift from heaven, and then you also develop it. You develop it through experience. Now, Patrick Mahomes showed up in the NFL. First game I covered on Monday night, I'm standing on the sidelines, and the dude is sprinting right towards me, full speed. Guys chasing him down for the Denver Broncos. And in the NFL, it's it's crazy speed that the game's played at. And he throws it lefty, and you could see as he's coming, he's not, the adrenaline's running, but he's not. Like, he's just kind of checking it out like he's in his backyard and kind of figuring out, okay, what can I do here? What can I do? You know what? Maybe I'll try this. And that's how that composure was God-given. And he showed up with it. And I also think for him particularly, when you have a professional athlete dad, you grow up with a certain mentality that most of us have to go to the NFL and have to work through the composure thing. I think he kind of showed up that way. I think Peyton Manning, the same kind of spirit.
But explain Jaden Daniels.
So I'm telling you, I just did. Some people respond in a presence under pressure opposite of what most humans do. It's irrational to the human experience, but some guys and that's why they're great, and great quarterbacks generally have this ability as things high. Look, that's the filter for quarterbacks. How many quarterbacks you see when it gets tight and they're, oh my gosh, and then their game gets smaller. They don't do as much. Their athleticism starts to disappear. Their mind starts to speed up, and they can't process the way they did. And some people are just built different, and he's built that different. You can see it. And in today's game, he is the ultimate prototype. He is threatening the line of scrimmage every play, and as he learns, he'll figure out, some of the things we just talked about, Superman cape, but he threatens it every play, and with an innovative play caller. And I've talked about this, but I'd like to say half the league has an innovative play caller who understands the game has changed, that there's more space. How do you deploy people out in the space? It's not like 2015. And how many teams in this league, Dan, I've scratched my eyeballs out, who are still running plays from 2015 and thinking, oh, this is the way we used to do it. We were really good. Bro, those days are over. You give me an innovative play caller. Cliff Kingsbury is amazing innovation. You saw some of the cool plays over the weekend. People are coming up with crazy stuff that's amazing. And you can deploy it in this way because the game has changed. The field is bigger. And then Jaden can just fill it all up, and it's fun to watch. And look, if I'm the Commanders and I'm going to Philadelphia on a championship weekend, I'm going to run it out just like I did against the Lions. Like, just run them out of the building. They cannot stay up with them. They cannot score 40. They can't score 35. They can't score 30. So just run it out and let them chase you. That's the way I would do it.
And by running it out, it doesn't mean run the ball, although they did run the ball much more effectively this past week in Detroit. I mean, the running game, and I give Dan Quinn credit for admitting this, that the running game was really stuck for a few weeks. Here are the numbers. Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler combining for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns on Saturday night. In the previous 5 games, they'd averaged 2.2 yards a carry. So that's back, but it's more than that. It's more than running the ball. It's the no-huddle offense. It's Jaden Daniels' ability to take off and run, and as he's talking about having the composure to not panic when the play falls apart or when he doesn't have an open receiver. He can either throw it away, and he's doing that more and more now. He really, at the beginning of the season, that quarterback is a lot different than the one we're seeing now, and he's learning to throw the ball away and not necessarily take off on what may be dangerous run. Mark Schlereth was a starter here on the last Super Bowl team, the 91 season. Left here to go to Denver and won 2 more. He knows about winning Super Bowl championships. He knows about winning one with a quarterback who won't be going to the Hall of Fame in Mark Rippon, and winning 2 with one who's in John Elway. And so he's seen both ends of the spectrum at quarterback. Not that Rippon was bad in any way, but he benefited from a great team around him, whereas Elway, maybe not at that point in his career, but certainly earlier in his career, uplifted his team in the way that Daniels is doing it now for Washington. And yesterday, Schlereth was on the Rich Eisen show with his take on what he's seen from number 5.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing when you consider the fact that this is the most dysfunctional organization under Dan Snyder. I mean, it was such a wreck. It was, an absolute train wreck. And here you get Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels to come in here. And Dan Quinn, I always get enamored with everybody talking about the fact that, hey, you've got to hire some young offensive guru, somebody that's young, that's going to connect with today's players. And I always laugh about that because you can either communicate and connect. You're either authentic or you're not. So your age truly has nothing to do with that. If you connect with people, you can connect with people. If you can communicate, you can communicate. And that's what Dan Quinn's been able to do. And then to look at yourself as a defensive coach and say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm not going to err on the side of protecting my defense. My offense and my young quarterback is what wins us games. So I'm going to put it all into him, and defense be damned. We'll go for it on every fourth down if we have to. It doesn't matter to me. And I'm going to put it on the quarterback's shoulders. It's not about managing the quarterback and running the ball and making sure we don't put too much on him. Everything is going to be on him. Every critical situation, every fourth down conversion, everything that we do as an organization is going to be on number 5. And to sit there and do all those things and to be where you are right now is absolutely incredible. I would argue that of all the quarterbacks that have played in the playoffs this year, there is no quarterback playing better than Jayden Daniels at this particular point in time. And oh, by the way, I would also argue this is the greatest rookie quarterback season we have ever seen in the National Football League. It's just amazing.
100%. We were saying that before, Mark. I don't have any problem saying he is the greatest rookie quarterback I've ever seen. And when you look at the list of rookies who have started in conference championship games, they all have one thing in common, and that even includes Ben Roethlisberger in 2004, who didn't lose a game until that conference championship game, is they were all game managers by trade because the coaches were all saying, don't go and make a mistake in a high leverage situation. Let the running game handle it. Let the defense handle it. As a matter of fact, with Ben, Mark, you recall back when he won the Super Bowl and Cowher goes off into retirement, the concept was Mike Tomlin's coming in and Ben can now play freer because he's got a coach that wasn't there when he was a rookie to tell him to slow things down and don't do too much. And we saw Ben make a Super Bowl and win it a couple of years later. That's my whole way of basically winding up to say Daniels is the exact opposite. They're saying, we want the high leverage for you and go do it on fourth down with 3 minutes to go and keep winning the games. It's unbelievable. I've never seen it.
I haven't either. I mean, I played, I go back throughout not only growing up and loving the game and watching the game and being a kid growing up in Alaska, being a huge fan of the National Football League, but like 12 years of playing and now 25 years of covering this game. And I'm like, I've never seen anybody put in that many high leverage situations where the organization is going, hey, go make a play for us. Yes. Hey, it's all on you. It's third down and long. It's fourth down and whatever. Go throw the ball. Go scramble. Go do something. But just go get us a victory. And it's absolutely incredible. And then to go to Detroit in the divisional round of the playoffs against that juggernaut of an offense that Detroit has and say, hey, we're going to go toe-to-toe with these guys because we know we can't slow them down for the long haul. So let's put the pressure back on their offense. Like by design, it is so counterintuitive to everything I've ever known about football. And to have Dan Quinn put his football team in that position where most of the time as a defensive coach, you're always erring on the side. You want to err on the side of protecting your defense. He's like, screw my defense. Like my quarterback's the best thing going. So if we put our defense in some tough situations, so be it. That's okay because our quarterback's going to bail us out of those situations.
Very good point from Schlereth about Dan Quinn. Yes, he is a defensive guy. And generally defensive guys do think like this, including the last defensive guy that coached the team, Ron Rivera, who had this riverboat Ron mentality when really he didn't. I mean, it really wasn't the way he coached the team here. He did some of that in Carolina when he had Cam Newton. He never had that kind of quarterback here, so he didn't really play it that way. But Quinn is smart and doing it. And, we've talked about this in an era where you're getting 30-something offensive-minded guys going to the front of the line for coaching jobs like Ben Johnson, who got the job yesterday with the Chicago Bears. Dan Quinn was 53 years old and a defensive guy and not a failed head coach in any way, but he did get fired in Atlanta. and took his team all the way to the Super Bowl. He still, has to wear the pain of blowing that 28-3 lead, but he blew it against the greatest quarterback of all time. So there's some of that. But I am really amazed at what they have done. Who isn't amazed by what they've done this year, but also with what was kind of a yawn as a hire for a coach, right? Because everybody was geeked up about the young offensive mind to develop the quarterback and Ben Johnson. And what do they wind up with? Okay, Dan Quinn. Well, we'll see how that goes. Well, clearly he was the right choice for the job. Maybe one of the great coaching hires in the history of this franchise, next to Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs won. This has worked out in a remarkable way. And as far as what Eisen is pointing out about the other rookie quarterbacks who have started NFC Championship games, well, we've had some that are like Sean King. Okay, they're not going anywhere. Mark Sanchez, who didn't have much of a career after being drafted high. Ben Roethlisberger, you got to remember the year that he quarterbacked the Steelers to the AFC Championship game, he wasn't even supposed to play that year. They had Tommy Maddox. Tommy Maddox had won the one and only XFL championship, the Vince McMahon XFL. And the Steelers brought him in, and he was a pretty decent quarterback. He started the year before, and the plan was to develop Ben Roethlisberger under him. It wasn't like, he's a rookie quarterback, he's a first-round pick, he's got to start right away. It didn't work that way. Maddox got hurt early in the season, and yes, he was sort of a game manager. They had Jerome Bettis. They had a really good defense, and, he was there to basically, not get in the way. As is pointed out here, this is a different dude. This is a guy who they rely on to make the plays, and when the defense isn't able to make the stop, don't worry, he'll bail you out. There's been nothing like this. And, sometimes these guys just come along. Like, okay, the Celtics were the best team in basketball, but Wilt Chamberlain revolutionized the game. He scored 100 points in a game. He averaged 50 points a game. We hadn't seen anything like this before. When Babe Ruth came along in baseball, they'd never seen anything like this before. I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the league, and he's not going to win the MVP, but he's certainly been the most valuable player. Nobody I've ever seen in this town anyway has uplifted a franchise in any sport the way that he has. Alex Ovechkin didn't make the Capitals instant Stanley Cup winners. It took a long time, but it happened. There was a great improvement in the Baltimore Bullets when Wes Unseld came along in 1968. They'd been a well below 500 team, and he got them into the playoffs, but they didn't win a championship till he'd been in the league for 10 years. And I don't think, Jaden Daniels may not win one this year, and it may take a while to do it. But to take a 4-win team and do this, Quinn gets a lot of credit. Cliff Kingsbury gets a lot of credit for it. The ownership, for sure. I mean, we'll talk more about that at 10 o'clock. The ownership, hiring smart people to run the organization and running it professionally as it was not run for 24 years under Dan Snyder. All that has helped to uplift the team. But it's this guy. It's number 5. And I don't think we've ever seen anything like it. And sooner or later, in every sport, a guy comes along and he's transformational. Wayne Gretzky came along in hockey at 17. Didn't happen instantly, but it wasn't long before it did, and had they not broken up that dynasty that they had in Edmonton because the owner couldn't afford to pay him, they might have won, instead of winning 4 Stanley Cups, they might have won 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Who knows? Meantime, this is what you're supposed to do on sports radio, so I got no real problem with what Seth Joyner did. But if you don't remember Seth Joyner, he was a great linebacker with the Eagles when they had those great defensive teams under Buddy Ryan in the late 80s and the early 90s. And I think he played probably a decade or more in the NFL and has transitioned into doing sports radio in Philadelphia on WIP. And they pay you to say things. So, you can't just throw it out there. Well, we'll just see what happens when they kick the ball off on Sunday. No, that's not the way it works. So I don't know who his partner is, but this is from the show, I think it was yesterday, where they are discussing matching up against Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. And this is what Seth Joyner put out there, knowing that it would become what it used to be called in the old days, bulletin board material.
Jaden Daniels, would you say he is already the 5th best quarterback in football? If the top 4 in whatever order are Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, and Josh Allen, do you think he's 5?
I don't give any young guy that kind of respect. Show me you can do it from year to year. I'm not giving you that in 1 year.
Even if he beats Eagles?
No, we had how many times have we had 1-year wonders? So let's wait and see before we start crowning guys. Okay. He could go completely in the tank next year. And, here we are talking about, what a great rookie year he had. And by the way, they don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of winning here on Sunday. You know that, right? Now,
yes.
hey,
I don't think it's that definitive,
James,
but you said it.
James, make sure you take that and play that all damn week, all right?
A drop of the week.
Yes, we call it drop. James is obviously the producer. They don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of winning. The weather forecast says there won't be any snowballs. It's supposed to be like in the mid-30s, and what we saw last week won't be the conditions when they take the field at 3 o'clock on Sunday. But it's going to be cold, and that used to be. Now, it's a former Eagle, so it's not a current Eagle. And the way stuff gets spread around on social media these days, nobody really cares. But in the old days, good old days, a statement like that would be in the newspaper, and it would be clipped out by the PR staff, and there'd be a copy of it in the locker of every player. Oh, look what he said, even if it's a former player like Seth Joyner. But Seth Joyner is doing what the job entails. He's on sports radio, supposed to say things. And, if you don't have an opinion, why not? I mean, I put mine out there. I think the Commanders are going to win the Super Bowl. I could be wrong. They could lose by 3 touchdowns on Sunday. But I think they're playing better than any team in the league right now. Of the final 4 teams, I think they're playing the best. Buffalo looked good for sure in beating Baltimore, but self-inflicted wounds by Baltimore did them in. The turnovers and the drop passes by Mark Andrews, particularly the drop 2-point conversion. Kansas City continues to just scrape by. That should be a really good game late Sunday afternoon. And the Eagles looked okay. I mean, the Rams are not supposed to go this far, and the Rams had a chance to win that game at the end, and Jalen Hurts is hurt. He's playing with a bad knee. He was asked about it after the game and played it really coy, like, I don't know if I can give any information on this. Are you going to be able to play? How's your knee? I finished the game, didn't I? So one way or another, he's if he plays, and I think he will, if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. And, yes, that Philadelphia defense is really, really good. And, yes, Saquon Barkley chewed up the Commanders in the 2 games he played against them, though they found a way to beat them when they came here. Now, of course, Hurts was hurt in that game, didn't play, but they are a formidable team. It's going to be tough to beat them, and the line keeps moving, which really surprises me because the hype for Jaden Daniels gets louder and louder, and the concern about Hurts is certainly there. But Eagles opened at 4.5-point favorites. It's now 6, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. But that's where we stand. 4 days before the game, 5 days before the game. And I love, as I say, I love Jalen Hurts as an athlete, and I'm down with A.J. Brown because A.J. Brown did something that's near and dear to my heart. He bought a Honda Accord. I have bought 4 Honda Accords. My wife drives a Honda Accord, a 10-year-old Honda Accord, which is very, very reliable. And it was a big deal when it got out on social media Sunday of him pulling up to the stadium in a Honda Accord, which costs roughly $30,000 for a guy who just signed a $94 million extension. He also made some news the week before by pulling out the book Inner Excellence on the sideline. The book was written by Jim Murphy, and it got to #1 on Amazon. So big boost for Murphy, who did a lot of appearances on radio in Philadelphia during the week. That cost $18. 2025 Accord, a basic sticker price, I guess, is around $30,000. Look, to me, the #1 thing you want out of a car is reliability. When you get in the car, you want it to start, and you want it to take you where you want to go without any issues, without any lights going on, like check engine. And 2 of my Hondas went to, I think, 180,000 miles. The first one I bought was a 1986. That went well over 100,000 miles. And the 2015 that we have now is closing in on 100,000 with no problems whatsoever. So, I mean, it's great to have a fancy-looking sports car or, beautiful luxury car, but it's still a matter of getting from point A to point B and not having to be concerned about breaking down along the way. And even if it's, this is no knock on electric cars, but you also have to have the ability to recharge them, whereas he's got the basic car. It's a great car. I heard Tim Kirchin talking to Tony about this, and Tim goes back and forth to Bristol all the time. He could fly. He likes to drive, and he's got an Accord. He said, that's the car I like. And he likes to listen to old baseball games or whatever else he does while he's in the car. And I applaud A.J. Brown for doing this. So, and also for reading books, too. I think that's an important thing. Doing it on the sidelines? Okay, whatever. He's a great player. And any time anybody is reading, I think that's a good thing. I take out books from the library. I like to read. I read a lot. I enjoy that. He should enjoy that as well, and he should enjoy the stability and the ability to drive a car that he doesn't have to worry about. And something else, these luxury cars, depending on where you park them, sometimes they get stolen, sometimes they get parts taken off of them. An Accord, it's a nice vehicle. It gets you there comfortably and safely, and I would say way to go. And the old Herm Edwards speech that he used to give, or maybe still gives at the Rookie Symposium, it started with the word one. He said, what you want is one house, one car, one wife. That's it. He said, you want to hang on to your money? That's how you do it. I don't think there's any concern for the financial stability of A.J. Brown with the $94 million contract, but to have a reliable car that you're not concerned about, how people are oogling you when you drive it, good for him. Good for him for driving a Honda Accord. All right, Tony and Mike on the Commanders' turnaround this season, and we'll get into what's become a bigger drumbeat now as the team advances. What do you think Dan Snyder is thinking right now? That and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, the countdown to the NFC Championship game. I still can't get my head around it. It's really amazing when you think about where we were a year ago. Total overhaul of the franchise. Yeah, it was the second year of the ownership, technically. But really, it was the beginning. The flushing out of the Ron Rivera group, and finally a real general manager and Adam Peters and a coach who frankly didn't draw a huge reception here. It was kind of a yawn, but he's turned out to be a grand slam. And the quarterback, as high a hopes as you may have had for him, he has outraced those in an enormous way. We are witnessing something that the league has never seen before. It's a league that's over 100 years old. I'm too young to remember Sammy Baugh, maybe comparatively in those days, in 1937 when he was a rookie and led the Redskins to the championship. There was interest, but football was very secondary in those days. And in fact, college football was a much bigger deal in 1937 than the NFL. Baseball was it. Baseball in 1937 was comparatively what football is now. That was what people were interested in. And okay, well, pro football, that's nice. They didn't make much money. You had players coming and going all the time. It was a lot different. Franchises folding up, franchises combining things. The league was totally different than it is now. And with modern football, if you want to go post-merger, a lot of people draw the line there where the merger happened in 1970. This is remarkable. It's over 50 years, and I don't think we've seen something happen like this. Tony and Mike have been chronicling this for almost 50 years. I think Tony was a sports writer as early as like 70, 71. So he has seen the entire, post-merger NFL and other things that have happened in sports. And I don't think he's ever seen anything like this before. He's got an interesting comparison here. This was Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI taking a look at the amazing turnaround that the Commanders have been able to pull off this year.
The turnaround is stunning. I hesitate to say complete because teams always talk about winning the ultimate game. If they get to the Super Bowl, it's complete. It's almost complete now. When you have a rookie quarterback play with that kind of poise, that kind of calm, it's just sort of stunning to sit there and watch it. I feel bad for Detroit, Tone, because I know what a crusade this was for Michigan, for Greater Detroit, for the Lions franchise. And they had a lot of people hurt. And they didn't make that excuse, but I can't talk about this game without mentioning 18 guys on that Lions squad who were on injured reserve. So, but Washington, I mean, a standing ovation. Standing ovation.
Yeah. I'll just mention the Detroit thing I wanted to mention very quickly. Dan Campbell in the postgame was crying. He was literally crying. And he said, it's my fault. Everybody's got to love this guy. Everybody's got to want to play for a guy like that who takes that upon himself personally. In terms of Washington, I am surprised. You know this. I did not think they were going to win this game. And their turnaround is, in fact, amazing. And it is built on two things. It's built on an ownership change and the hiring of smart people within the last 12 months who have done this. They went from 4-13. I think they're 14-5 now, which is just amazing. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there are only 4 teams left to go to the Super Bowl. And if Washington were to win the Super Bowl, then in my entire lifetime, the only thing comparable to this would be the 1969 Amazing Mets, who won the World Series after finishing 9th in a 10-team league the year before and had never finished higher than next to last in all of their existence. So it would be comparable to that. The Washington team, they go on 4th down all the time. They make it 81% of the time. Jaden Daniels has unbelievable poise, and he doesn't turn the ball over. You look at them and you just say to yourself, I know you say this and I say this, Dan Snyder, really, what are you thinking? Because this is so clear that it is ownership change. That's what's going on here. It's ownership change, right? I mean, they put 31 points on the number 1 seed in the first half.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes, let's point that out. And one other thing real quickly. Tony, it shows you, and analytics can't account for this, the confidence a team derives from a great player. It isn't always a quarterback. In years and decades past, it used to be the running back. It could be a great linebacker, Lawrence Taylor, Dick Buckeyes. It could be that. But the confidence you derive and you play with when you have a great player, in this case of Washington, the quarterback, my goodness.
Yeah, I think John Elway might be a good comp on that. Not the 2 Super Bowls that he won, but the 3 he went to with teams that weren't worthy of being there. They didn't have good defense. I mean, they lost the game to the 49ers. I think it was 50-10 or 52-10, something like that. I mean, they got their doors blown off. The team that played the Redskins in the Doug Williams Super Bowl, where he threw the 4 touchdown passes in the second quarter. They were not a Super Bowl worthy team, but he was good enough as a quarterback to get them there. They didn't have any great receivers. I mean, nothing. It was on Elway. The teams that he won with were much better, and they had good running game, and they had Mike Shanahan as a very innovative coach. I mean, there were things that were different at the end, but he wasn't the same quarterback either. That was the last 2 years of his career. We've seen the elevation of that. As far as Tony's comparison to the '69 Mets, that's interesting. That is something I really hadn't thought of. I made the comparison to the 1999 Rams, in which Kurt Warner wasn't even supposed to play that year. Trent Green had been a highly paid free agent, or relatively highly paid for that time, coming over from the Redskins, who had a terrible start to his year as a starter there when he replaced Gus Frerotte, and Gus Frerotte was terrible the first couple of games, and he replaced him. And they went on to win, I think, like 7 of their last 12 games, or it was like a 7-9 team. And the ownership change was going on with Snyder coming here, so they didn't have time, or they didn't have the necessary things to put in place to make a signing. So Green goes to the Rams. He gets hurt in like the preseason. I think it was the preseason. And Kurt Warner, who was Arena League, they made a movie about him. He had been with the Rams the year before, hadn't played at all. Dick Vermeil was in his 4th year as coach. It wasn't like this in the first year. And the same thing with the Mets. I mean, Gil Hodges had been managing them for a few years. He had left the Senators and gone to the Mets, and it's a different sport and all that. So that's an interesting comparison to the '69 Mets that Tony makes. But Tony also brings up the name Dan Snyder. And some people go, oh, forget it. He's gone. Stop worrying about him. But as they've gone further, you have to wonder how he's looking at this. And good for the Washington Times to have Liam Griffin write a story about the Snyder piece of this whole story. And I didn't hear Adam Schefter say this, but he's got a quote from Schefter who says, I think somehow the football gods may have had something to do with this. This is the first full season that Dan Snyder is not involved in Washington, and now they're looking down at Washington saying, enjoy this trip to the NFC Championship game. And he looks at, there are sites on Twitter that do this site that looks at where the Snyder yacht happens to be parked. And it's been docked in the Netherlands for 2 months, as he points out there. We don't know what he's doing there. The logs from his private jet and yacht, along with his business filings for Schneider UK Investments Limited, are the primary paper trails for a man who was once, I don't know, he calls him outspoken. I don't think he was outspoken. I think he was a lightning rod in the NFL in many ways. And it also says that Snyder and his wife are the only 2 listed employees for their England-based investment company, for whatever that is. That's probably a tax setup or something like that. But I pulled out the statement that Snyder issued, or the Snyder people issued, after the ownership change went through in July of 2023. I'll read you a couple of parts of it. He said, we are proud to have built the most diverse leadership group of any NFL team, including having the highest representation of women, underrepresented groups, and the first full-time black female coach in league history. She's now with the Chicago Bears. But when he says underrepresented groups, and the most diverse and highest representation of women, well, that was in an effort to save his butt after the Washington Post did those investigative stories, which really got the ball moving to get the team out. Liz Clark and others are the Woodward and Bernstein of the sports angle of this. Their stories were game changers. We can thank them for the ownership change in a big part. But the last paragraph of this statement is so appalling and so disgusting. This is, again, from July of 2023, from the Dan Snyder and wife group, I guess. It says, being stewards of this historic organization for the last quarter century has been the privilege of a lifetime. When we purchased the team nearly 25 years ago, Dan was quoted as saying, I'm a fan, a huge fan. It's that simple. This is as true today as it was then. During our next chapter, we are looking forward to spending time with family and devoting our energy to the causes that matter very much to us, including furthering our long-standing support of breast cancer research. And yes, they did donate their house to the American Cancer Society. That was a tax benefit, but okay, they did make a big contribution there. But to say that they were stewards and to puff out their chest about the hiring of minority groups when they were doing it as a knee-jerk reaction to save their butts is absolutely disgusting. So, okay, pardon me for doing this, but this is just the way I look at this point. And it's such a breath of fresh air that Josh Harris is in the bowels of the stadium in Detroit after the win on Saturday night, and a couple of reporters, Ben Standing and Chris Russell, approach him, and yeah, sure, I got a minute or two with you.
What would I said last time? Culture, talent, and people. You know, when you have the right people, I think I've been talking to a lot of people. What's going on in that locker room is different. It's different.
What do you think your 15-year-old self would be thinking right now?
Well, man, I'd be out. I'd be like, I'm waiting it out. You know, like this has been a long time coming for the DMV, and I'm so happy to be part of it, and I'm so happy to be part of it for these guys, and they earned it, and let's go. One game from the Super Bowl, right?
One game. I know you're going
to.
I know you're going to deflect, but like Ben said, you know, you grew up here, you're a fan, everything. You bought the team. To put it all into perspective, how do you explain this journey?
You can't put it in perspective. You just God. I mean, you can't really put it in perspective. The notion that we would win 4 games last year and be in the NFC Championship, and look, you know, Jaden's a special guy.
But it's happened because of him.
Thank you, man.
It's happened because he made it possible.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Well, let's go. I look forward to seeing you wherever we are, LA or Philly.
We'll be there.
We're Team of Destiny.
Yeah, well, now they know they're going to Philly, and that's the way an owner should act. And he Talked about the DMV and how this they really are stewards. These guys are stewards. They are. Josh Harris and Mitch Rales, who I know a little bit, those guys are concerned about the Washington area. They didn't need something to make money. Yeah, they're in the business of buying and selling and making money. That's what they do. But this was not a financial deal for them. I 100% believe that Dan Snyder was really not much of a fan of the team. I got enough evidence along the way, people I know that knew him and worked with him who say, nah, he really wasn't much of a fan. He did this to impress his father, and it wound up being a boatload of money for him. But he's a pariah. He can't come back to his hometown. He can't walk into the Palm, let's say, and not get booed. Yeah, he's sitting on a pile of cash. He got $6 billion to sell the team. Mazel tov. But he is a long distance look now at what he did to this franchise. And as a steward, what a disgusting term, because a steward looks out for the team. And what we had under his ownership for 24 years was embarrassment. It was disgusting. It was open sewage pipes dropping on the fans sitting there. It was railings collapsing at the stadium. It was a mess. He made a mess of things. And when you have a season like this, look, there are teams that under the period of time that Snyder owned the team that didn't win Super Bowls either. But there could have been more seasons like this along the way. And what did we have? A couple of good years under Joe Gibbs where they made the playoffs, okay. They slipped in once under Jay Gruden, the magical year of RG3, which all blew up at the end. That's it. We could have had real stewards, and we have those now. And to stop and look back at the mess that Snyder left behind, I don't buy the people who say, he's gone, move on, forget about him. No, never forget. And make sure that if and when this team is sold again, I would imagine Harris will turn it over to his children. I think he's got 4, maybe 5 kids. They'll own the team at some point. But no, never again does a guy like Dan Snyder get in and own this team and just disgrace what was once a great organization and seemingly quickly is on his way back. This from Nick Saban last night. I found this fascinating. I guess it was probably pregame when they had time to kill, and they were talking about Jalen Hurts and now the Eagles moving on to the NFC Championship game. And Saban said this, and again, I admired Jalen Hurts when he was benched in the national championship game and could have left and had 2 more years of eligibility. He stayed another year knowing he was going to back up Tua Tagovailoa and then transferred. But stayed there knowing that he was not going to be the starter. I give him an awful lot of credit for that. This was Saban on how he helped to develop Jalen Hurts, not just as a college quarterback, but one who would succeed in the NFL.
Oh, I think he's doing the things they need to do to win. I mean, they're a running football team. That's what the Philadelphia Eagles are. They got Saquon Barkley. They run it. Jalen can run it, which he had a big play last night as a runner. So you got to make people defend that, and then you got to throw the ball effectively enough in play-action game. And I think Jalen is a good enough passer to do all those things. I think the one thing, and this is any athletic quarterback and every one of them, and when Jalen was with us, we would have team and 7-on-7. And I would say, you cannot run. You cannot scramble. You have to throw the ball on time. And because these guys are so athletic, they see the rush coming, and they think they can scramble and get out of it. And a couple of those sacks that he took last night, he took them because in normal circumstances, no snow, no bad knee, all that, he probably would have been able to escape and get away and make a play. And he's done that so much in his career, it's hard to tell a guy, hey, don't do that. But I was trying to train him to become a better on-time passer, by not allowing him to do it in practice. And I think he improved in that regard. But he's still a great athlete, and those guys are going to make plays, and you can't take that away from him.
And that's also going to be part of the transition for Jayden Daniels. And we've seen it. We've seen it more and more throughout the season, that he doesn't necessarily take off all the time. When he sees that there's nothing there, he throws it away. And, Jalen Hurts, the point he makes, I think it's really, and it's going to be interesting for Sunday how healthy that knee is going to be. But what Saban saw is a guy who's a great athlete and thought he could still make plays with his legs, and he couldn't because of the snow and because of the bad knee, or a combination of both, whatever it was, he couldn't do that. And I wonder what a practice is like on that, where you got this guy who's got great running ability, because he was never really known as a passer at Alabama. And that's why he got benched at halftime in the national championship game. They knew they needed to throw the ball, and Tua Tagovailoa was a much better passer. So, he's managed to make the most of it in the NFL. It's nobody expected this of Jalen Hurts. He was a guy who was maybe going to be a backup. Maybe going to be they had Carson Wentz. They still believed in Carson Wentz. He had a great rookie year. He wasn't brought there to displace him. He was there to be the backup. And things have transitioned in the way that it has. So that was fun. That was fun to hear that from Nick Saban. Anyway, that's it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.